Oh, man, you're in my sweet spot now.
Welcome to SinCast, presented by CinemaSins.
All right, everybody, welcome to the SinCast. This is Chris Atkinson with CinemaSins, joined as always by the voice of CinemaSins, Jeremy Scott.
Holla.
And from Music Video Sins, Barrett Share.
Yellow.
And today we're going to continue the series of best of the years that we've been alive. And today is 1989.
1989! Yes! Yes! Yes!
Does it get those wonderful toys?
Ty Cobb wanted to play. None of us could stand the son of a bitch when we were alive, so we told him to stick it.
You must chill! I have hidden your keys!
Looks great. Little full, a lot of sap.
Excellent!
1989.
Oh, it's so good.
1989 is a year that's a lot like 82 and 84. It's going to be hard to really come up with a winner on this one. I am predicting it today. We are going to have multiple rounds in 1989.
I think so.
I don't think this is going to be like one of those where it's like, oh, that's obvious. It's going to be difficult. This year is going to be difficult.
Yeah.
What's the first thing that pops out? Batman, probably. Batman is
I've
the
already
first.
had one guy on Twitter say, if Batman doesn't win the 1989 talk, you guys are dead to me.
I'm sorry.
We're dead to that
We're
guy.
dead to that guy.
Batman is not going to win.
There's no fucking way Batman's winning.
Now,
Sorry, man.
that was the movie of the year.
Yeah.
At least in the year itself, there was no bigger film. We had not had a Batman movie since the Adam West, Burt Ward, 60s BS movie.
And that was considered dark back then.
Yes.
When you look at it now, it's very cartoony, but it was considered dark, and everybody was like, whoa, I've never seen anything like that. They treated superheroes like really seriously.
Yeah.
And
of course, our definition of serious has changed over the years.
Yes. It was a crazy summer. I remember watching Batman, and what was it? I think Honey, I Shrunk the Kids came out that same summer. And there was something that came out. Is it Honey, I Shrunk the Kids came out the same day as Batman or Lethal Weapon 2? One or the other. It doesn't matter which one it came out. That's a huge day.
Oh, yeah.
in cinema right there. But Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, since I mentioned it, not a good movie today, I don't think.
No.
But it was a 12-year-old's fantasy to watch that movie.
Oh, yeah.
And Rick Moranis may have fallen off the face of the earth after that movie.
There was a
few
run
sequels.
there. Yeah,
there were. After the sequels. After he was contractually obligated sequels, he left.
There was a weird run about between Fantastic Voyage and Inner Space and Honey, I Shrunk the Kids about shrinking things down and then running around in that environment. I guess Ant-Man is kind of a similar thing. But it's
yeah, totally. Who wouldn't want to be super small and run through their front yard like it's 10 miles long or whatever? Who wouldn't? Also, I mentioned Lethal Weapon 2. The Lethal Weapon series, that hasn't held up very well either.
No.
I think Lethal Weapon 2 was the biggest of the franchise, I think. But those movies, what is it? Is it the antiquated cops are the good guys and are somehow we don't like those movies anymore? Or
no, I think we do. I was
do?
actually watching The Heat just recently about
but
a
that's
horribly abusive. Yeah, I realize it's a whole different thing, but the horribly abusive cop that plays by her own rules and does her own thing, and at least in that one, they don't threaten to take her badge or anything like that. But yeah, I think there's still a market for that. I mean, Lethal Weapon took it to a whole different level, and it was super shouty, like I mentioned about Richard Donner stuff.
Well, I mean, if I were flipping channels, other than Lethal Weapon 4, because they look so different and Jet Li's in it, I'm not sure if I stumbled on one. I'm not sure I could tell you which one it was for 20 minutes.
Right.
They all run together for me.
Yeah.
I enjoy them, but they're very similar to me.
They seem very that era to me.
Yeah.
They're uniquely that era. That whole comp genre thing is it went by the wayside, of course, once comic books became the big action movie go-to, but I think if you tried to make a movie like that today, I mean, like, Cop Out or whatever, it's mostly trying to be a comedy, or it's trying to be a retro type of thing.
Or the other guys. Like, most of our cop movies these days have veered towards funny as opposed to action.
21 Jump Street.
Yeah. Another thing that stands out is, God, there's so many. Dead Poet Society came out in 1989. I love Dead Poet Society, but you know what? Just before this podcast, I seem to recall that Roger Ebert hates this movie. In fact, I think he put it in his book, I hate this movie. And I was reading his review.
Just to eliminate any sort of misunderstanding.
Yeah, exactly. I was reading his review, and I can't disagree with him. He makes so many great points about it, about how it's really, by the end of the movie, they don't have much of an appreciation for literature. They have more appreciation for the teacher.
Yeah.
And there's a lot more to it than that. But aside from Roger Ebert there, which I totally agree, I love Dead Poet Society.
Oh, I do too.
I've seen this movie 1,000,000 times.
Yeah, me too. And I can't agree. I mean, I haven't read the review, and he may make a lot of salient points, but I'm going to treat that the way a lot of people treat our videos. Like, I enjoyed your video, but I still like the movie. Mm-hmm. Like, Dead Poet Society very nearly made my top 3 list. That's how much I like it. And I know we mentioned this before in another podcast, but since we're talking Dead Poet Society, if you're listening, you should go watch the recent SNL digital short that spoofs Dead Poet Society. I don't want to say anything else.
So perfect.
But it's fucking hysterical.
Oh, that was so perfect.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, Dead Poet Society is a movie that I had on VHS. If I had it on VHS, then you knew I really liked it, because that was something that I probably wore out when I had it. But I've seen it 1,000,000 times, and it's just one of those movies. It's just endlessly entertaining. It doesn't matter whether whether what he's doing is noble or not, or if it's right or not, or whatever. It's just a good movie. It's just fun.
You've got that performance from Robin Williams, which is just up there in the stratosphere with anything he's ever done, and it was shades of stuff that he would do in like Good Will Hunting. Yeah. Because everybody still at that point probably thought of him as, the manic comedic actor.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of that in there, but there was a lot of like pathos, and there was a lot of, dramatic chops shown in his performance. It was awesome.
Yeah.
And remember how if you had a VHS tape that you wore out, because VHS tapes used to have like white lettering of the movie's logo and some credits and whatnot, and eventually that would start to wear away to where you couldn't even see the full title of the movie anymore.
Yeah, right.
And a VHS tape I did that to was Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
Yeah. Oof. Oh my God. And this was Indiana Jones returning to form after Temple of Doom. Now, Temple of Doom, did we even mention Temple of Doom?
No, because that was such a stacked year that
we didn't even get to Temple of Doom in 1984, but I'm sure we mentioned some other bullshit movie over.
We're like, what's at the bottom?
I don't know if we got called out on it. I'm sure we did, but we didn't even mention Temple of Doom because that movie isn't nearly as fun as Raiders of the Lost Ark was, and then Last Crusade would be later. Last Crusade, great movie.
Oh, it's my first introduction to Indiana Jones. I saw Last Crusade before I saw Raiders and Temple of Doom. I always felt like it was treated like Return of the Jedi by a lot of Indiana Jones fans. Like, okay, I understand. But maybe it's because it's the first one I saw. It's almost a perfect little adventure. There's no scene in that movie where I'm like, I'm going to tune out for a little bit.
Yeah. Why is it treated like that? Because it's got everything from even like the opening scene with River Phoenix playing young Indy.
Yeah.
The addition of Sean Connery, the globe-trotting, the love interest that turns badly. Like, everything is great in this.
Yeah, I agree. I just think for some fans, like
there's no Ewoks.
My friend Josh is the biggest Indiana Jones fan you're ever going to find, and for him, Raiders is the Bible, right? He saw that one first. Again, maybe that plays a part. But yeah, I've always felt like he talked about Last Crusade almost like Lethal Weapon 4. Like, they're older now, let's cash in and make another one, and it's a lot more harmless. I just freaking love it, man. If I'm going to watch one Indiana Jones movie, I only have 2 hours, it's going to be that one.
It takes, and it has a finale that is reminiscent of the opening of Raiders of the Lost Ark, even though it's not the same type thing. But I do like how he has to solve these ancient riddles to get to the final goal. And I love also that the final goal, once he gets to that point, isn't an easy thing either. Like once he gets into that, grail room or whatever, it's not like, oh, well, let's go pick the shiniest grail there is,
Yeah.
He actually has to still think and figure this problem out and everything. Last Crusade is great. And I think, surely time has been better to that movie. I mean, maybe at the beginning of when it came out, Indiana Jones fans didn't like it, but surely now it's
especially now that we've seen Crystal Skull.
Yeah. Another gosh, it was a huge year for sequels.
Mm-hmm.
Back to the Future 2 came out.
Oh man.
Yep.
And I like Back to the Future 2. When we recently sent it, I realized how ridiculous this movie is. But I remember the big problem for Back to the Future 2 among people my age and everything was that a lot of people couldn't follow the time travel stuff, and that I found that fascinating.
Yeah,
the whole chalkboard thing and the parallels and all these other different things that Doc Brown puts on the chalkboard. It is sort of just a sort of like callback to the first movie. Let's just do everything we did in the first movie and then move on.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's an enjoyable little movie.
Except with the new Jennifer.
Yeah. Elizabeth Shue, though.
Yeah. That movie, that's all right. I always liked that movie more than most, I think, because I'm not sure I had seen anything prior to that showed me a scene I knew from another movie from a different perspective.
Yeah,
right?
that was awesome.
Like seeing the dance and everything that happened at the end of that first movie from a new perspective always blew my mind.
Yeah.
So I never really, until we started doing this YouTube thing, I never really gave much thought to the time travel in that movie. I was just, okay, makes sense. All right, whatever. But I freaking love it. I love it probably more than the third one, but not as much as the first.
That was the first time that I realized that they, I don't know. That was the first time that when a sequel came out and they would redo scenes from the first one. Like, that was the first time that I dealt with that. Like, I was so used to what they say in Back to the Future at the end of that movie, because I had seen it a million times by the time 2 came out, that when they did the redo stuff, I was like, no, it's not right. It's not how you said that.
Yeah. But this is like, in Pulp Fiction, it's always bugged me that Rosanna Arquette says her line differently when we see the diner. Now, I think that may just be Tarantino having fun with the way we remember things, doing a little Rashomon stuff to us or something, but it always bugs me. Why can't you say it the same way you did in the first time we saw you? God damn it.
Yeah. What else, guys? What else stands out?
Well, 2 kind of romances, very different movies and from a different perspective, according to age. Huge ones. Say Anything and When Harry Met Sally.
Yeah.
And
both with ellipses at the end of their title.
Exactly. And but yeah, no, I mean, they're so great. And starting with When Harry Met Sally, like the romantic comedy that people want to hold up as a standard, right? Because it was completely non-conventional, because the interaction between the two of them really carries an arc, and it's not just an artificial arc of like meet, fall in love, trouble, get it together at the end. It is kind of like that, but there's a series of ups and downs throughout that we've never seen, including the whole like men and women can't be friends.
Right.
So that was really, really great. And that was Billy Crystal at the top of his game and Meg Ryan really at the top of her game.
I really think this movie set the stage for Seinfeld.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. The way it looks at relationships was completely new at the time. And gave birth to, I think, Seinfeld and a host of other movies and sitcoms, right?
Well, and speaking of that, first off, this is Rob Reiner again. He's just on a freaking roll, and he's
crushing dingers.
Yeah. The writer of this was Nora Ephron, who would later, be a director on her own. I don't think she had directed anything by this point, but you're talking about Seinfeld and everything. The original ending of When Harry Met Sally was they didn't get together. And, it ended up, of course, being Reiner and Crystal and all these guys saying, well, we should really get them together at the end and everything, outvoting the writer. But yeah, because that's what Seinfeld was all sort of, Seinfeld had, he had a platonic relation, even though they dated and all this other type of stuff. We never really wanted Jerry and Elaine to get together in that show. But yeah, I totally agree with you. There was some sort of precedent being set there.
Well, and we talked about Fast Times in a recent podcast, and then Cameron Crowe comes back this year with Say Anything.
Yeah.
This is his first directing gig, right?
I think it is.
And the beginning of his love affair with Eric Stoltz.
yeah.
I love Say Anything. I loved it before I had ever even been in love. I didn't understand relationships in love, but that movie, I understood the dynamics and what was going on. And maybe one of the most iconic images in all of film is him standing outside with that boombox up in the air.
Yep.
To the point where even people who haven't seen that movie know what that means.
Yeah, and he's playing Peter Gabriel, one of his greatest songs, In Your Eyes.
Yeah.
Which perfectly encapsulates that moment. The thing about that character, Lloyd Dobler, is he is unassailably good.
Yeah.
I don't think he does anything wrong in that movie.
No.
Including as he's walking her back from prom, pushing some broken glass aside.
Yeah.
And it's just little things like that. And even they'll say why are you so good? And he is completely just head over heels in love with this woman. And it plays perfectly because he's that kind of actor that can convey perfect honesty through those crazy eyes of his.
Yeah.
That he can just say if you're locked in, you're locked in.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
it shows when all those girls are in the room together and they're like Lloyd Dobler, and they all just Lloyd Dobler, and it sort of encapsulates the whole thing. There's so many great lines in it too. I love the scene where he's talking to John Mahoney. And he's trying to tell, he's doing all this, what is it, judo or whatever? Kickboxing and everything. So it's I don't really focus on that right now. I just want to date your daughter.
He says, I don't want to buy anything sold or processed. I don't want to process anything sold or bought. I don't know. I just want to hang with your daughter.
Yeah. No, I just love that scene so
I also
much.
love when they have a down patch and he's outside the gas station and it goes down the line of the guys at the gas station giving him advice or reacting to this. And then finally at the end, it cuts to the last guy and pans down. It's this little kid. He goes, bitches, man.
Yeah. I mean, Say Anything and When Harry Met Sally. I mean, those are those are movies that guys wouldn't mind watching.
Exactly.
On date night or whatever. I mean, that's just what it comes down to. They're equal plane. I mean, they're not just all super 27 dresses type romantic comedies or whatever.
Yeah, well, speaking of that, I watched it recently, and it's probably something that couples would watch on a date night. Sex, Lies, and Videotape.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And correct me if I'm wrong, this is Steven Soderbergh's first directorial.
I don't know if it's his first.
I don't, because I think he did.
It put him on the map for sure.
Yeah, it did. One thing that you can say about this movie is that it sort of set the tone for the indie film movement that came up in the 90s.
Yeah.
It's sort of the beginning point of it.
It is, but they don't make this movie anymore. It's an adult movie made that focuses on late 20s, I guess, people that are kind of getting their careers started and everything, getting married, settling down, but still have that romantic wanderlust, that kind of gets revived by, in this case, the James Spader character, who is his Spaderist.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, he had a run between this and another movie called Crash, not the Crash that we know about, David Cronenberg Crash, and Secretary. He had a run of these weird kind of psychosexual type of dynamics things. And he is outstanding in this. And it's just a perfectly wrapped up drama about relationships and, people being people with each other, even though the lies is a part of the title, but it's really, really cool to watch.
Yeah, this is his debut, by the way. The other ones that he did were either shorts or documentaries or whatever. So,
and you can see the kind of things that he uses, later on when he's really flexing his Out of Sight and things like that.
Yeah.
89, also the year Disney animation comes roaring back.
Oh my God!
With The Little Mermaid.
Did it ever?
I think we mentioned some of the animated movies it put out earlier in the 80s, Black Cauldron and Sword in the Stone, and nothing since that classic era had ever really caught on.
And just a year before this, Oliver and Company came out. It makes you wonder where the philosophy change happened with Disney animation that they said, they finally came out with something that everybody wanted to see instead of just, whatever Oliver and Company was.
It was not only a big hit, but it was such a big hit, it by default made the next 3 animation movies must see. Right? Because we had Beauty and the Beast after that and Lion King. And those were must see event films by that point. That's how much everybody loved The Little Mermaid.
Oh, yeah. Another one, Oliver Stone is still on a roll here, born on the 4th of July, although it's not one of his best, but it is one of the best cruise performances that you'll ever see. So it definitely worth mentioning on this one, but I don't have much to say about it other than it's good.
Was he nominated for this?
Yes.
I think he was.
Yes, he was.
It's a good year for dramatic performances, right? So Glory came out in 89.
Yes.
And that's Denzel, he's still amazing. He's still one of my top 5 favorite actors, but in that movie, so young, and that scene where he just cries that tear. Oh my God. It's such a, I'm not even saying the movie's like an A+, but the acting performances. We had Daniel Day-Lewis in My Left Foot. It was just like a year for actors acting, right? You mentioned Robin Williams and his performance in Dead Poets Society. It just feels like it was a really top year for individual performances.
Well, and Martin Landau in Crimes and Misdemeanors had a terrific performance too.
But yeah, that was Cruise's first nomination. He'd have 2 more after that. We haven't seen anything else since then. If you're talking about Glory, it was also a pretty good, I don't know if you want to call it pretty good year for race relation movies. That's not really the way I want to say it, but I think you know what I mean. Because Glory was not like great race relations, and neither was Do the Right Thing that came out the same year.
I thought you were going to go Driving Miss Daisy.
Well, and I was going to say Driving Miss Daisy after Do the Right Thing, but Driving Miss Daisy won Best Picture to the chagrin of everybody who studies the Oscars. It's not a bad movie by any means, but come on, it's not the best movie of 1989.
Isn't there something though with Jessica Tandy? Like, don't they do this every few years where some older actor gives a performance that feels like maybe their last good one, and we just kind of shower that movie with praise more than we should?
That's exactly what that is. Yeah.
I mean, I like that movie, but it's not the best picture.
No, it's just insanity, and especially when you look in the face of Do the Right Thing, which is such a dynamic, just balls out, one of the best movies that you'll ever see. This is Spike Lee's, I believe, second movie. He had done School Days just before this. But oh my God, so much stuff in Do the Right Thing informs what we do in the 90s later on. There's so much work with the camera and just like, let's try this out and let's try that out and everything. It's one of the most dynamic movies you'll ever see. It's also, in this day and age, probably one of the most prescient movies that has it may not be prescient to the people who, to Spike Lee, he knew about all this stuff that we're going through today then, but I think for a lot of us, we didn't know that this type of stuff went on, and Do the Right Thing is as relevant today as any movie that I can think of. Has he
made a movie ever that's better than that?
No, but he has come close a couple of times. I mean, Malcolm X is really good.
I like Malcolm X.
And then there's a lot of stuff that he never gets quite to Do the Right Thing, but the 25th Hour has a lot of that Do the Right Thing type stuff in it. 25th Hour is really good. And I even like He Got Game. That's another one that's Spike Lee's always interesting. Now, I've never seen Clockers. I have. I know that, I didn't hear very many great reviews for it, but I know that when the book came out, Richard Price and all that was a huge book that came out, and I don't remember, I just didn't see the movie.
Girl 6?
Yeah, Girl 6. Yeah, well, Spike Lee also comes out with a lot of just like experimental stuff too.
Not that. Did you think we were going to talk about Girl 6 when we sat down to talk 1989?
I did not. We somehow went from Do the Right Thing to Girl 6. Let's talk about Teresa Randall's performance in Girl 6.
I have to mention Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. Which they are still talking and flirting with the idea of making another one. And it's just one of the funnest stupid movies that knows it's stupid.
It really is.
And we were joking, cracking lines from Dude, Where's My Car earlier.
Yeah.
Same kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Stupid ass movie, but it knew it was stupid. And so Bill and Ted's was on repeat for most of my friends and I for a good 2 or 3 years there.
Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned Dude, Where's My Car? That's exactly what I was going to come up with. It's sort of, you can see the DNA in that movie. like, all right, look, this is going to be an insane adventure. We're going to just do what we want to, okay? And you just, if you came in, it's your fault,
Yeah, and you want to talk about movies, playing fast and loose with time travel.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
This one makes Back to the Future 2 look like something written by Einstein.
What's crazy is that they use the main characters as just a blank canvas for all this shit to happen to, because they are so stupid.
Yeah.
That like anything that happens, they're just going to go along with, and like, all right, Socrates, come on, man, step in.
Yeah,
Beethoven, hey.
Also on the comedy front, I don't know what you guys think of The Burbs, but I love The Burbs.
I fucking love The Burbs.
Oh my God, The Burbs is a movie that's super underrated. Like,
yeah.
This was Hank's like right after Big, and I think a lot of people sort of expected something else out of this. But man, I love The Burbs so much.
Yeah.
That's a perfect comedy horror movie. Playing in on the paranoia, or is it, of the neighbors when this new family comes into town, and of course, a lot of people I remember my age used to do the Corey Feldman thing, like the pizza dude, and all that.
Pizza dude's here.
Pizza dude's here. We're gonna call the pizza dude.
Well, I was going to say something, but now you just made me wonder. In the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie, are they playing on The Burbs when he says Pizza Dude's got 30 seconds?
Oh, I don't know.
Because I didn't realize Corey Feldman was in The Burbs. I forgot that.
I feel like that's just sort of I feel like that's a subconscious type of thing. I don't think they're really going for that, but I think that's probably, at least a subconscious reference.
Well, Tom Hanks was actually in 2 perfect comic horror movies that year, because he also did Turner and Hooch.
Yeah, absolutely. And who can forget? Yeah.
I mean, we finally ended the age of big, huge star with an animal movie. Like, because, Matt LeBlanc did Ed with the monkey. Jason Alexander did a monkey movie. Clint Eastwood did a monkey movie. Mm-hmm. A lot of people have done dog movies. The dog is basically one of the stars of Turner and Hooch. But we don't have that anymore, right? I'm asking, hopefully.
I mean, if we do, it's probably straight to video type stuff.
I did see a preview for somebody gets turned into a cat, and I think it's Kevin Spacey. Some movie that's coming out.
Christopher Walken and Kevin Spacey.
I don't know about that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, what else about 89?
Field of Dreams.
Oh man, you're in my sweet spot now.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I'm a huge Field of Dreams person, a big baseball fan, and just the idea of making your own baseball field.
Yeah.
You have enough land to make a baseball field. And not only that, like, it's down to the lights in the outfield and all this other type of stuff. That was a huge thing for me back in 1989.
Oh yeah.
And just the mysticism of it and everything, hearing the whispers and going to find James Earl Jones and all that, who I guess is playing a thinly veiled J.D. Salinger.
Yeah.
I love that movie so much.
I do too, and I think one of the reasons is so many men have dad issues. You know what I mean? Like, even if you don't have like the kind of dad issues he has in this movie, we all struggle at some point in our lives to really relate to and understand our fathers, and this movie taps into that in a hugely powerful way, I think. But yeah, it's a combination of the mysticism and the magic, the baseball, and then the themes underneath. I was watching this movie 2 days ago. Every time I see it on one of the movie channels, I stop and watch for a little bit. I can't help myself.
Yeah, and such like powerful moments too. Just the fact that they go and find that one guy who had, was it one at bat or whatever, and he comes and plays, and then somebody has a heart attack or whatever.
The daughter chokes on a hot dog.
Yeah, that's what happens. he crosses the line. He can't play
Yep.
anymore, and he's like, all right, well, this is what I was really born to do. Was to be a doctor.
Yeah, and he did still get to have his at bat and wink at the pitcher. I mean, granted, it was in the ghost Iowa baseball field, but his story has such great closure there. That's a fantastic movie. I can't really think of anything bad to say about it.
Yeah. What else, guys?
Well, I'm running out of. I have 2 lists here. I have notables and then notables but not good.
Yeah. Yep.
And I'm pretty much down to my notables but not good. Like Kickboxer came out this year.
Right.
Yeah.
Roadhouse came out this year.
Yep.
Mhm.
Which at Roadhouse, maybe I am on an island, but I have never understood people's love for this movie.
It is pure Patrick Swayze nostalgia.
Okay.
That is what it is.
Okay.
I mean, back in 1989, I think you had to be a certain age to enjoy that movie first.
Yeah.
And then the sort of endurance of it, it's such a cheesy movie. That's the other thing. When you get into this era where people love to like just enjoy things ironically and stuff like that, that is that perfect, movie to do that to.
Okay. Because I've never liked it.
It is not a good movie.
Okay.
No, it's not a good movie by any means at all. A couple of other ones that I thought of. Well, we've talked about Major League. It did come out in 1989.
Yeah.
It's a fun baseball movie.
Yeah.
We've talked about its ridiculousness.
Yes, we have.
But it's still fun. It's a fun movie. So not much else to say about it.
There is one more good movie that we just brushed on for a second, but Crimes and Misdemeanors from Woody Allen.
Yeah.
And that's, I would say, generally considered in his top 3, maybe, between Manhattan, Annie Hall, and Crimes and Misdemeanors.
It might be, actually. Yeah. It's certainly one of the best he's made in the last 25 years. Match Point is one that that is frequently cited, but Crimes and Misdemeanors is probably one of his best.
Yeah, and it's a kind of a psychological crime thriller almost, as much of as a Woody Allen movie could be.
Yeah,
it's still got kind of those aspects and the dialogue and his performances and everything. Between Martin Landau, who I think won the Academy Award for this, right?
No, he didn't win. He did get I think he got nominated. Yeah, because he didn't win until Ed Wood.
Yeah, and Jerry Orbach and Angelica Houston, just like a terrific cast, and everybody was just in sync. And it was kind of a different genre that he really is kind of perfected at this point. So it's a terrific movie. You should definitely check it out.
Yeah, Landau got nominated and Allen got nominated for writing and directing. He almost always gets nominated for his writing,
and he never shows up.
Except for 2002 when they did the special 9/11 thing. That was the only time he ever did it.
Yeah.
The other ones we didn't mention Ghostbusters 2.
Yep.
Exactly. Jeremy's shrugging. I am shrugging as well. This is the first time, by the way, this is important to me because this is the first time I walked into a theater and came out at the age of 12 and was truly disappointed about a movie. This was the first time I remember being disappointed about a movie. Yeah. And I remember going to play a baseball game that night or something like that and telling all my teammates I didn't like it, man. Yeah. I don't understand what's going through me right now. It's I'm 12. I shouldn't feel these things.
You have taste now.
Yeah,
it went off the rails. I mean, it really did. I mean, they just kind of pushed it way too far. I mean, the performances are still fun. The Peter McNichol lines are great, and Aykroyd and Murray and Ramis are still having fun. But the whole pink ooze thing is just a little overdone, and I mean, it's just it's sequelitis, basically.
But it's gotten this weird sort of cult following since. And if this new Ghostbusters with all the women somehow fails or whatever, and we're going to somehow make a statement based on that or whatever, please look at Ghostbusters 2 and look that it doesn't have anything to do with women at all. Sometimes it has to do with the screenplay. Sometimes, not all. But what else on here? There was just some mentions. Uncle Buck, John Hughes is... Uncle Buck's is a pretty good movie, but it's John Hughes sort of getting tired of directing. His next movie would be Curly Sue. That'd be the last movie he ever directed. He did write Home Alone, which would come in next SinCast, but I guess he sort of got tired of the directing thing. Uncle Buck was a fun movie. They've even tried to make 2 TV series out of it.
There's one running right now.
Yeah,
no, it just got canceled.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Thank God.
So I mean, the material is apparently right for TV series, but they never. It's just one of those okay movies. A Christmas tradition, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation.
Yep.
I think everybody likes that. I don't know. I don't remember everybody liking it when it first came out, but man, dude, people love it now.
Oh,
Man, I would rather watch Christmas Vacation than any of the other Chevy Chase vacation movies.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's got
I'm the
everything.
same way about those. Those are so good.
Yeah.
And then The Abyss, James Cameron. This is a good movie. I remember watching it and I was like, I don't know. I don't really like this. But you watch it in subsequent years. I really, really have enjoyed
This
The Abyss.
is also the first movie where I ever saw boobs.
Oh, yeah?
Really?
Well, I had
This
a
is your
weird
first boob movie?
childhood. I wasn't allowed to watch a lot of movies that were likely to have boobs.
Okay. You're going to have to refresh my memory on the boob scene because I don't remember that in The Abyss.
Maybe I'm thinking of Leviathan.
It could be Leviathan, which also came out this year.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like there were a bunch of like Leviathan and Deep Star 6 and all that. That might be the next year, but
Well, one of those underwater movies, I saw boobs and it was life-changing. That's all.
I don't remember it in The Abyss. If there was in The Abyss, then it's one of those another James Cameron PG-13 movie that gets away with boobs. But The Abyss is another movie that's better, like the director's cut and all that other stuff like that. It's better than the theatrical cut. So I think it's gotten sort of even though it was a big hit back in the day, I think it's gotten sort of a lot of more appreciation.
Great
today.
Effects, groundbreaking effects,
fantastic effects. Yeah,
awesome.
Cameron's always on the pulse of that. And then Steel Magnolias came out. That's another one we'll just mention. Weekend at Bernie's, and Parenthood. Parenthood was another great comedy.
that was a great
Another
one.
Steve Martin at his best. And
I
all
was
that.
watching The Talented Mr. Ripley yesterday. The part where he kills Freddy and he carries him out to his car. And I was like, well, it worked in Weekend at Bernie's. Like, why is it such a big deal?
Yeah. And Spielberg continuing with his weird, like, 80s. He did Always in 1989.
Yeah.
I think this is the movie that he finally goes, all right, I'm going to take a break. And the next time I come back, it's going to be Jurassic Park. So yeah, it was a weird, that was a weird movie for Spielberg. And now after that, it's like Tango and Cash and Star Trek 5.
Tango and Cash.
I'm ready to vote.
Casualties of War, Brian De Palma, Casualties of War, stuff like that. Yeah. So I'm ready to vote too. Look
All
who's
right.
talking.
What's the order, Chief?
So today's order is Barrett, Jeremy, and Chris.
You're screwed, Chris. We're going to screw you.
I hope so. I hope so.
Whatever Barrett picks, I'm going to agree with, just to fuck you.
Since there's no
Oh,
cameras
man.
in here, I hope so.
I don't know. We actually may come to somewhat of a consensus because I'm going to go with Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
Wow. All right. All right.
Because for everything that we mentioned about it, like it's just so perfect from start to finish as an adventure movie, as just a classic representation of a classic character. And like you said, that last sequence in going through the Crusaders and all that stuff, and figuring out the puzzles to get there, and then picking the right thing, the right grail. It's just awesome. It's just terrific. So that's my pick. In a crowded year, I could have probably picked among 5 movies, and I couldn't talk myself out of Indiana Jones.
Well, we are going to go several rounds because he's right. There are so many picks that I can't argue against. I can't fault him for picking Last Crusade, but I'm going Field of Dreams. Because of everything I said earlier, because it just hits my sweet spot. There are movies that are just, you know, those moments in life when you're hanging out with friends and something silly happens and it's hilarious and you cry laughing, but it's never as funny trying to explain that situation to somebody else because you had to sort of be there. And this movie hits me like that. Like, it's just, I can't articulate why Jeremy loves it so much. But he does. There's not a bad thing about it. It's Kevin Costner at his everyman best. James Earl Jones is hilarious. He doesn't get the chance to be funny a lot in films, and he's playing a cranky old bastard, so maybe that helps. But I just love this movie through and through, and so I'm going Field of Dreams, and I'm curious to see where Chris goes.
We are going to go multiple rounds here, guys, because Do the Right Thing is my number one choice of 1989.
Nice.
And really, honestly, if you haven't seen it, you should watch it just for the fact that of the artistry that's just involved here. I don't think there's any movie in 1989 that has this kind of movement in it. And it's just it's something that no audiences had really seen before.
Yeah.
I don't feel like. And yes, it's racially charged. Yes, it has some very, very heavy moments in it, but it is, you cannot go through it better than the way Spike Lee does. And it's just an exciting film. And I can't recommend it enough.
It's almost disappointing that the movie gets categorized or talked about almost solely about the racial charged element. And
right.
That is good. That we need stories like that. But the artistry of his directing work and the camera work and the way he sort of stages some of those scenes is often discarded when we talk about this movie because the racial stuff is so much of a trigger, right? But I can't fault you for that one either.
But that's how he builds that tension, like the whole focusing on the heat and everything, and every scene builds tension.
Yeah.
Or every segment kind of builds tension leading up to the finale and everything. And it's great.
And Spike Lee does all these like little segments that just show up in the movie, and you're like, what does that have to do with the story? Well, it doesn't have much to do with the plot on the whole, but it does show you what kind of powder keg you're on.
Yeah.
And there's just a simple scene of a white guy going to his brownstone in Brooklyn and everything, and black guys come up to him and they're like, just, what are you doing coming to our neighborhood and all this other stuff. Is, hey man, I have a right to be here just like everybody else does and all that. And it's just like, there's just this like sort of like, oh my, this is kind of something that's just bubbling at the surface, and that's why it's in the movie. And then it just takes a little bit of thing to set that off, and that's why that movie just keeps barreling towards its finale. Anyway, Barrett, what's your second choice?
Wow, I hate this because I'm not going to go with any of those as my second choice.
All right.
although they're awesome, both of them are fantastic. I never got into Field of Dreams as much as people in my cohort did for whatever reason. I love baseball and I love Kevin Costner, but just for whatever reason it didn't resonate with me. My second pick would actually be it's between two of them. I'm going to go with Crimes and Misdemeanors.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
Yeah, for every reason that I said before, like everybody's really at the top of their game here, and it's a very different, to that point, it's a very different Woody Allen film.
All right. Well, then my second pick is When Harry Met Sally.
Yeah.
Nice.
And this might be the longest
This is going to go some rounds
ever. But for all the reasons Barrett mentioned when he brought it up in the main discussion, it was so unlike the traditional romantic comedy and gave us a look at not only a non-traditional relationship, it gave us dialogue and comedy where they talked about things we hadn't seen characters talk about in romantic comedies. It gives us this relationship over many years instead of just a single season. It's just fantastic. Rob Reiner at the pinnacle of his awesomeness. And I'm going When Harry Met Sally.
Well, and there's plenty, just like 1984, where I have seen some of these millions of times. I can't fault so many of these movies, and I'm going to go Dead Poet Society on my second choice.
We have done 6 different, we haven't doubled one yet.
We haven't doubled one yet.
And you can't argue with any of them.
No.
And Dead Poet Society is a movie, I've seen it probably in my top 5 as far as number of times seen. And I don't know what else to say. It's just such a great movie. I love Robin Williams in it, and even though the Ebert thing that I was reading, I was like, I kind of agree with that.
But you still love it.
I still love that movie so much. So Barrett, on to you again.
I am going to break out of the mold because this was 2A for me. I'm going to go with When Harry Met Sally.
Oh,
too.
okay.
It's just right in the wheelhouse of a great romantic comedy. Right when Reiner's at his nadir.
Yeah, and my third vote is Say Anything.
Oh my God, yeah.
I don't need to say any more. I don't need to say anything about Say Anything.
That's right.
If you've never seen it and you've ever been in love, go watch it. You won't regret it. I'm curious to see where this goes, though.
This is getting harder now. It's actually getting harder.
Yeah, it is.
Because when you guys have mentioned When Harry Met Sally and Say Anything, both movies I adore. When Harry Met Sally is going to be my third choice.
Does that mean we have a winner?
I think so.
Yep.
We just crowned When Harry Met Sally.
I think so.
Yeah.
I honestly don't think it's the best movie of 1989. This is sort of how Oscars, I think, go a lot of times. But you can't vote against it as a bad movie. It's not a bad movie by any means. It's a great movie.
Right. Well, and the point is that we're collectively choosing the SinCast's, best movie of the year. So you don't have to believe it's the best. This is just where the math falls out.
Yeah. I mean, and honestly, you asked me next week, I could have said Last Crusade there. That's how kind of bullshit it gets once it starts getting to that third and fourth choice, is that you're weighing I could make a lot of these my first choice.
Yeah.
That's how these go. So, okay, guys, When Harry Met Sally won our 1989.
You should see his face. You should see his face when he's saying this, because he's
I'm
not
the
happy
deciding
about
vote. I could have said Last Crusade and just made this keep going, but
he is bummed out.
I just when people hear this, it's going to be like, oh, it's such a great year, and you guys picked that one.
But if they listen, they're going to hear the 6 picks prior to that being determined and know that we spread around the love pretty well, I think.
Yeah. Okay. So I can live with it. I just can't believe we came up with it.
It's the consensus pick. It's not the best pick.
Right,
it's the consensus pick.
I'm hoping that your shock and awe for the last 5 minutes when you've turned off this SinCast, you'll realize that's what we've been saying the whole time. Okay. So guys, today we're going to be talking about summer blockbusters in general. And Barrett, I'm going to let you take this one away.
Okay. So similar to what we did last week, we were talking about sports movies, and we titled it, the episode Summer Classics, as a reference to the All-Star Game. But it kind of got us in the mood to talk about, being that it's summer, in case you haven't noticed, to kind of think about the things that happen around summer. And, of course, it's a big blockbuster season. And we wanted to look back at some of the big blockbusters of the past and see what worked, what didn't, what we liked and what we didn't, and what could be kind of lessons learned from the past moving forward. As we've seen, there's been some kind of more bad than good come out recently, especially on the blockbuster front. So I'll start by posing a question to you guys. I've kind of separated the overall genre of blockbusters, summer blockbusters, as kind of effects films and non-effects films to start us off. And with effects films, I was thinking about things like Aliens, Avengers, Inception, Jurassic Park, Ghostbusters. Now, those aren't primarily effects movies, and that's probably what we'll get into. But when it comes to these movies that have special effects, and especially CGI, where they almost become dependent on it now, what about those movies that I would say are good effects movies? What about those? What do they get right that they should do more often?
Well, Jurassic Park, we make jokes in Sins videos all the time about how is it possible that we had better effects when Jurassic Park came out than we do today. The answer, of course, is Stan Winston. And there's a lot of high-quality digital effects going on today, right? And the best stuff you don't even know is there. If you watch any of those Game of Thrones, how we did the effects videos at the end of every season, you'd be floored how many trees and buildings and flags and horses are not real. You don't realize it when you're watching the episode because it's subtle. It's that well done. Effects don't work today because they're bad. We can't afford the computer artistry to get it done well, right?
Yeah. I mean, you have something like Titanic that came out that was so masterful, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you could see the big disparity between what Titanic did and what James Cameron did. Of course, he's got all the money in the world, but you think
That's
that it would
part
be
of it, though.
Progressively getting better and better and better, and it's not.
Well, but a lot of that he did on Titanic was practical, right? He built like a 1/5 scale replica of the ship and shot out on the water. And so, we may end up making this discussion all about practical versus CGI. I don't know, but I want to compare something like Jurassic Park with Jurassic World.
Yeah.
Where, I think Jurassic World's dinosaurs looked okay, but there's an indescribable fakeness to them that wasn't there with Stan Winston's dinosaurs, even in the cases where Spielberg used CG. And why is that?
Well, in Jurassic World, there's several non-existent dinosaurs that are in it.
Yeah.
Like they had to make those from scratch. And there's also, this is something else that sort of gets into your brain while you're watching a movie. Something as simple as the park itself, which has that big, huge building in the background that they always show or whatever. Yeah. That's totally CGI.
Yeah.
Those type of things infect your mind as this isn't real. I'm not in a real world.
Yeah.
There's too many effects going on all the time in the background and stuff flying around and all that, where Jurassic Park seemed to kind of use that sparingly, even though there are a couple of scenes where they're like driving through and there's like all the tachyo, is that what it is? They're all the herd of all those dinosaurs. They do that a couple of times, but most of the time it's sparing. And you have Stan Winston, who is, did he teach anybody anything before
it doesn't seem like he did.
I don't think he did. I think he's the only guy who could do the thing that he could do.
Yeah, and it's a testament to his greatness. The further we go into the future of cinema, how great his shit still holds up.
Because he was also a part of that Terminator 2 stuff,
yep.
Which, yeah, you look back at those are just fantastic today. They're better than today. How is that possible?
Well, and I think we're hitting on something inadvertently, because that was James Cameron again.
Mm-hmm.
James Cameron and Spielberg are the kind of directors that not only get a budget to be able to do good effects, but they have the artistry to make the most of the budget that they do have. And maybe that's what makes the difference, right? I don't have anything against Colin Trevorrow. I don't know the guy. I've never met him. He might be awesome, but I don't think Jurassic World showed me anything that made me want to give that guy a Star Wars movie.
Yeah.
But he's directing Episode 9 or Rogue One, one of the two.
I also feel like this sort of ties into what I'm talking about with when you get time to make these movies. When you have practical effects and you have to actually build this world and make it look real, sort of like what The Force Awakens did, even though The Force Awakens has a lot of digital effects too. It's mostly a lot of the cool stuff in there is practical. But when you have time and you sit there and you're not trying to hit a release date, that's one of the hallmarks of summer blockbusters is trying to get a release date, because they're trying to get the merchandise and all this other type of stuff. They're trying to get a Taco Bell tie-in. They're trying to get all these different things that don't service the movie. It services their money and their bottom line. And I can't fault them for trying to do that. But for the actual movie itself, it loses a lot in the translation on that.
Well, and that is, we've sort of gotten to a point now where they're planting their flag on summer dates 3-4 years out.
Yep.
A lot of the comic book movies are doing this. We know the dates on most of the upcoming Star Wars movies, they're not all going to be summer. Most of them would be Christmas. But once you set the wheels in motion on something so huge for a specific date, there comes a point where the quality of the content you're creating no longer matters.
Yeah, there's how many times are they on set and they're like, let's do this and whatever, and then they're not quite getting what they want, but they're like, we don't have another day to do this.
Yeah.
we have to go to the next thing.
Yeah.
We'll have to deal with this.
Yeah.
And you start piecing those together over time, over all the scenes. Yeah, that's going to show up. It may not when you may not think of it that way when you're just shooting one scene and then you shoot another one 2-3 weeks later or whatever. put that all in one movie, it just becomes, it starts to weigh it down.
Yeah, and that doesn't even necessarily have to do with just the effects. That applies to everything, right? The character, the performances, the editing, everything, the sound, all that stuff also has to be compressed. So even if you have the greatest effects in the world, if you've got shitty dialogue, or if you've got a shitty performance, or you've got shitty editing, then that's going to affect the overall, aesthetic of the movie, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And now now we're going to go see Ghostbusters in a few days, and we're going to do a mini pod review of that movie. How long has that movie been set on this date?
Oh, it's probably been 2 years.
And how much room did they probably have to wiggle to make that movie as good as possible? I mean, maybe they had plenty, I don't know, but I'm seeing progressive ads with Flo and Ghostbusters.
Yeah,
I'm seeing Papa John covered in slime.
Kobe.
This is the kind of shit they're setting up that forces them to not be able to move off that date.
Right.
And, sometimes a movie comes through and it's still great. Obviously, there are plenty of examples of that. But, this bottom line is all that matters. Opening weekend, box office take. It's just slowly choking creativity.
Yeah, and this gets into the larger discussion of how studios are having a hard time greenlighting anything original because there's so much money being thrown into these movies that they have to make these succeed, or else they don't want to spend a whole bunch of money on something original because it's such a gamble for them.
Exactly.
And I don't know what the solution is. I feel like if they just give these movies an extra year, they could sort of balance out, but I'm not the guy looking at the accounting numbers.
Well, and that's the thing, right? No studio president ever took the job and made his first order of business to make a great movie that wins an Oscar.
Right.
First order of business is, I'm going to make money.
Yeah.
And you have to step back and understand the business decisions when Transformers 5, 6, and 7 get greenlit. Because that, like you're saying, that's a known entity. They can do some math and figure we'll probably make this much. Whereas if they wanted to make something brand new from scratch that nobody in the world knows anything about, they got to work harder to make people want to see it. And it's a gamble because they may not like it.
Yeah, no name recognition at all. Even though like stuff like The Martian and Gravity and Interstellar, all these movies that, our original titles and everything, they were able to get those, I don't know, those were almost magic the way those came.
Well, yeah. What about Mad Max? Is that seen as like just a happy accident, or you think that's something that could be used as a template going forward?
Well, that speaks to what we're talking about directly, because he was storyboarding that movie for 10 years. And they shot the thing when they actually did. The production lasted like 3 years.
Jesus.
Like, he just took his time.
Yeah.
And again, there's another instance where a director is just masterful with practical effects and then sparingly using CG in ways that you won't even notice it. Like, I know people who think that entire movie was practical and that there wasn't any CG in it. That's how good he was at mixing the two. But he just took his sweet ass time. Like, he wasn't going to make it until he was ready.
That just just sort of along those lines, like, that's why I think the first Iron Man is one of the best comic book movies, is because there was no pressure.
Right.
They probably just let Jon Favreau just like, let's, we'll see how this goes, and then we'll try to come out with Avengers at some point, but whatever, we'll see what Iron Man does. And he was allowed to just sort of, well, let's make a good movie first. Mm. And because I remember when I first saw trailers for Iron Man, I didn't think that was going to do anything.
Yeah.
Because it didn't make sense to me. I was like, who's Iron Man?
Yeah.
And then suddenly it just blows up the box office and everything because it was actually good and had good word of mouth and everything. I feel like Jon Favreau was given the most time to do any of those movies that have come out since.
Well, then even by the second one, you can, whether or not they did, you can feel the studio pushing Black Widow and Rhodey, War Machine, and already pushing the cinematic universe stuff. And maybe that's why the second one was such a mess. I don't know.
Well, and I remember when just the end credit sequence was enough to get you excited about the next movie. Now they want to do it in the movie, especially like Avengers Age of Ultron, which did that in an insane degree. It made that movie feel like it was 5 hours long.
Or Batman versus Superman, where they literally just cut out an entire fucking segment
what the
to
fuck
introduce
was that?
all of these new characters by email.
Yeah. Yeah, and not to mention the stupid ass dream sequence that happens in it too.
Like, hey, I'm going to be in your next movie. Okay, see ya.
Yeah, exactly. So a lot of that factors in too. I mean, it's making you excited about the next movie should be the job of the marketing department that makes that next movie.
Right. Well, the end credit sequences have now turned into the whole movie. And what we get at the end credit sequence now is more often cryptic shit I have to go Google because I don't know what the fuck I just saw.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's changing. It's completely changing. The way that they make these things, the things they care about regarding them, the way they market them. And it's just becoming like this sequelitis is not going to slow down.
No.
This cinematic universe thing is not going to slow down.
I think we talked about something concerning this year where there's all these number 2s that have been coming out that have been horrible and they haven't done anything in the box office, and we sort of hoped that this would be the end of that or whatever. But I was looking at some stuff today, and I'll always talk about how 2005 is the worst year of movies ever created. 2005 was chock full of sequels and remakes nobody wanted, and it was one of the biggest drop-offs from previous years that movie industry had ever seen. Despite that 2005 showing,
right,
they continue to do these remakes. Now they're, I guess they're trying to make, let's not make a remake that's about a 1960s TV show, but we'll make one that's from something in the 90s. People kind of remember the 90s or whatever, but they don't remember that about 2005. They're just going to keep on doing this stuff over and over again. And I think 2016 is up compared to last year, which is insane to me.
It is insane.
It's really on the basis of 3 movies.
Deadpool and
like,
Zootopia.
It's more than that, but it's like 5 movies that have made, and it's all Disney nearly.
Yeah.
That, that's the reason why that we're ahead of last year.
Well, and I think, again, this conversation is probably going in directions we never thought it would.
Sure.
But I think it's really interesting to look at, and I've talked about this on Twitter before, Disney has become almost a monopoly. They're so large. They own Star Wars, they own Pixar, they own the Muppets, they own Marvel. That is going to be an impact on film in general, that so many blockbusters and movies are coming out from one house. That's going to have a sea change effect on the whole rest of cinema. I wouldn't be surprised to start seeing more super teams where Paramount and Universal go, let's team up, and then we can be like Disney, and we'll have the Transformers and the Mummy movies or what have you. But I mean, that has an impact. I don't think we can deny that from a business standpoint.
Well, it already has in some ways, in that the studios have started doing their, like, let's make this a universe. Let's make King Kong a universe.
Yeah,
like, even
which
though
they're doing.
Like, which has 3 movie potential, I think. That's about it. There's not really that much you can do as far as a King Kong universe. I don't think, as far as like quality movies are concerned anyway.
Well, and it's going to affect whether they greenlight a standalone film based on whether or not they think they can franchise it or universize it, right?
Yeah.
Some films that may be great are going to get turned down because it's not universe building or franchisable, and that's a freaking shame.
Yeah, I mean, how many in the past 5-6 years have probably been turned down based on that alone?
Right, who knows?
And maybe they've tried to make it, but they don't have the support and the backing to do it and all that, and they, a great idea turns into an okay.
Well, every year they put out that blacklist, right? The 10 best unproduced scripts in Hollywood, and everybody was always raving about them. Well, there's a reason those movies didn't get made, because they weren't Transformers 5.
I guess you need somebody like Christopher Nolan to come in and do a franchise that they know is going to be a franchise, right? Like if you have somebody that's a true auteur, somebody that comes in that has a knowledge of practical effects, and has a knowledge of character development and of plot and storyboarding and editing and things like that, and then you end up with something like The Dark Knight being a summer blockbuster that is in a universe, a self-contained universe. And even that goes off the rails by the third act.
And that's the thing, right? Like, DC has given that role to Zack Snyder.
I know.
Which makes no sense to me or anyone. And then on the Marvel side, they keep bringing in big directors and then forcing their hands so much they quit. That's what happened with Favreau. That's what happened with Joss Whedon.
Edgar
Joss
Wright.
Whedon was Edgar Wright. Joss Whedon was almost flat out said it. right? Like it crushed his soul to make that movie.
Yeah.
And that's sad because Joss Whedon is an angel.
I know.
But we need more of that. What you're saying, bring in somebody who's got an established track record and talent, but they're not doing it for various reasons. One is creative on the Marvel side, and then on the DC side, either Zack Snyder's cheaper or he's more easily controllable than Nolan. I'm not sure, because even prior to Man of Steel, I didn't feel like he'd done anything to show he could handle the DC franchise and universe.
I feel like 300 bought that dude all the goodwill in the world.
Well, and he must be like amazeballs in person. Like you meet that guy and you walk away, like he's one of those guys you're like, that's a fucking awesome guy. Like he must be one of those guys, right?
Oh yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, I mean that's why I keep, hoping that Affleck will squeeze in there into the Nolan role of this new DC universe. He maybe directs a standalone Batman and then becomes the new Nolan. I would freaking love that.
I just feel like that DC universe is already lost.
It is.
I don't really think there's anybody that can help, that can save it at this point. The individual movies that they're planning on making. Can you see everybody like line? I mean, I honestly, like I said, I honestly didn't think anybody would line up for Iron Man, and I was totally wrong. And I mean, I think I knew like a couple weeks before it came out, but like a standalone Wonder Woman, a standalone Aquaman, all these movies, I can't imagine people just going, yeah, that's for me. I can't wait to see what they do with the Justice League. And all
I can't either. I can't either.
And well, especially the way they did it, in that introducing them first and then giving them their own film, rather than what the Iron Man model of like, we'll do their own movies and then we'll combine.
That's how Marvel and Disney has also changed things, is that Warner Brothers and DC are like, we need to have something like that now.
Right.
And they forget about the fact that Marvel took years to get that. In fact, I don't know how long they've wanted to do an Avengers movie, but it came out with all this other stuff beforehand, like the Hulk and all this other stuff, hoping that one of those would take off, and it took a little bit. It took them kind of some learning curve, before they could finally got that Iron Man, and they finally got stuff that, oh, okay, I want to see Thor, and I want to see like Captain America standalone movie. I want to see these movies, and now DC's like sort of taking that Marvel momentum and trying to jump on a speeding train. Sort of. It's weird, like how that's not how you build your universe.
Right.
So
no, they're going about it in complete backwards fashion, and I think you're right. I think the DC film universe is probably already too far gone in this direction to be salvaged, but I think they're going to keep going. And I think we're going to get 3 to 7 more movies in this universe that make $200 million opening weekend and nobody really likes.
Yeah. And then you've got the supplement of this, like the Suicide Squad too, that'll kind of be like the...
As an aside, we talked recently about a Batman movie from the villain's perspective. Mm-hmm. And David Ayer, the director of Suicide Squad, gave an interview. And it sounds like that might be the Batman we get in this movie, because he says, Batman's not the main character. So the only time we're ever going to see him is when he's terrorizing the villains that are our main characters. So I wanted to point that out because I had basically been asking for that. It sounds like we may get some of that, but I don't think that movie could be A+ home run awesome. And I don't think it saves the DC film universe.
By the way, was I completely wrong that Suicide Squad was supposed to be an R-rated movie and it's PG-13?
I don't know.
It's PG-13. It's official.
Interesting. Looks pretty violent.
When the trailers came out, and because of what Deadpool did and all that, I was just going to assume that Suicide Squad was R-rated. It's not. It's PG-13, which decidedly takes away a lot of the edge that you see in the trailers.
Yeah, and then you're going to get the R-rated longer director's cut on Blu-ray.
Yeah. Now, it bears saying that we've spent a lot of time talking about comic book movies, even though this is summer blockbuster general. But it just goes to show that in the past now 20 years, that's how much they've infested the summer.
Yeah.
Sort of going through a history of summer blockbusters. Jaws is considered the first big summer blockbuster and everything. Before then, a big movie, they didn't have any sort of release date issues. They could come out with something in March or April. It didn't really matter. Mm-hmm. It was a big movie. People would go see it. when Jaws came out and it made so much money, and sort of the reason behind it was, well, kids are out of school, and they did so much awesome marketing on it. And then Star Wars, a couple of years later, came out in May. It sort of set a Memorial Day precedent. So you started seeing a bunch of stuff come out. Memorial Day was the big, huge, summer block, but that's when summer started, was Memorial Day. In the early 90s, it was Twister that came out in 96, which was the second week of May. You saw a couple of things start coming out in before Memorial Day, sort of trying to get a big movie before Memorial Day hit, so they would also get a Memorial Day bump at that moment. And then it was The Mummy. It was funny that you brought that up. The Mummy in 1999 was the first movie that I could see that came out that first week of May. It set a precedent. The Mummy did gobs of business in that opening week. Ever since then, that has been the coveted release date, is first week of May, because that's what starts the summer season. And there's a couple of misfires in there, like Van Helsing and all that came out on the first week. But it's been dominated by comic book movies. Spider-Man came out in 2002, the first week of May. The following year, it was X2, X-Men United, and then it was, there was a gap there where a bunch of like non-comic book but big time failures came out. 2008 is when they came out with Iron Man. They have not relinquished that first week of May since.
Yeah, I was going to say Civil War came out the first week of May, right?
Yeah, all the big ones, all the huge stuff. Well, and Thor also, but I mean,
and weirdly, Batman v Superman came out in March.
Yeah. Well, it was supposed to come out the first week of May.
Right. It was the same date as Civil War.
Yeah,
right?
and
why they didn't back further into summer as opposed to into the spring? They must have had some kind of spring break algorithm or something that told them that was a better one.
Well, and there's also, I'm sure that somebody was like, Zack Snyder's had a lot of success in March. He did 300, he did Watchmen, all that. Let's put it in March. That's where he's
Mr. March.
Some asshole who said that. Look at his March numbers. But
he's better than Spielberg.
Yeah. But there's that spring break week, basically. That's when that came out, and like Hunger Games had a good launch during that. Once upon a time. But yeah, that's another thing that's sort of changed, is how summer has changed. Where it used to be Memorial Day, now it's first week of May. Occasionally get a Fast and Furious movie in April, which is like, that's its territory. It starts summer kind of early when it does that. But it's just interesting to see that, like, just how they've owned summer. Yeah. They picked that prime week for the summer to start, and they've owned it. And they'll own it all the way up until 2018 at least, because they've got Guardians of the Galaxy 2 coming out next year, the same on that first week of May. They've got Infinity War coming out the following year on the first week of May. They're going to have that for a while, but I guess I want to kind of try to steer the conversation to just general summer blockbusters. Maybe we get back into the 90s somewhere or whatever, and like not talk about comic book movies so much.
Yeah. Maybe not back in the 90s, but I was looking at Pixar's release schedule over the last several years, I guess right in the 90s when they started with Toy Story and then A Bug's Life and Toy Story 2. And it was always holiday releases, right?
Yep.
It was November, December, right around there. Yeah. And then Finding Nemo came out in May, in Memorial Day in 2003. And that started the run, besides The Incredibles, which came out in November, that started a run of like Cars, Ratatouille, WALL-E, Up, Toy Story 3, Cars 2, and then Brave, Monsters University, Inside Out, and on and on. So like they've figured out a niche like right in that June-ish.
Yeah, it's like the second week of June usually.
Yeah. And obviously it's doing great. I mean, look at Finding Dory and all that stuff,
Well, my county where I live is slowly transitioning to year-round school, where where eventually they'll have like 3 or 4 week breaks throughout the year, but they'll be going to school in the summer. And I know that this is happening in other places, and I know that there are a lot more charter schools and free thinking when it comes to how to educate your kids and homeschool. So my question is there maybe a chance we get to a point where summer blockbusters don't have to be dropped in the summer anymore, or the studios begin shifting their thinking a lot. Because right now we're still operating on basically, everybody's out of school for the summer, so let's do. And that's why the Christmas season is big too, because everybody's out of school for. So I'm wondering if some of that leverage is going to start to melt away as if more places in the U.S. move toward year-round school or what have you. It's just it's fascinating.
Maybe so,
for me to think
especially
about.
For the animated stuff, because if they do have a sweet spot, and God knows they've done all the analytics about when and where and how and in which area of the country is in and out of school. If you've got something like the beginning or the first 2 weeks of June, chances are almost everybody's going to be out, even for like a 2 or 3 week break.
Yeah.
And so if they can get that in there too, then they go back and they start talking to their friends, and then they start going still to see the movies, even while they're in school. I think there's a way for them to capitalize on.
Do you think they look at Deadpool and say, "Wow, look how great a movie can do in the winter"? Or do you think they look at Deadpool and say, "Man, imagine how much we'd have made if we put it out in July"?
That's exactly what they're thinking.
Yeah.
The next Deadpool will not come out in February or January.
Yeah, no. They sort of, there's experimental dates. That's why you see a certain movie like Deadpool come out on a Valentine's Day weekend or whatever like that, is like they know they have something special here, and as long as they market it right, maybe they'll, I don't think they expected it to do as much as it did. But they also know that if they had come out with Deadpool in the summer, that there would have been comic book fatigue for sure by that point, because you have Civil War and X-Men Apocalypse and all that have come out. And then now you got Deadpool coming out. It probably wouldn't have made as much money in February, as it did in February. But now a Deadpool 2 will certainly come out in May or June or something.
But I feel like
that.
some of the highest grossing movies of all time were winter releases. Titanic, Avatar,
they are.
Force Awakens.
You have to get the perfect alignment, though. Like if you come out with that movie in December 17th or whatever it is, that has to be sort of like there has to be like 3 weeks of people being out of school. It's got to be that perfect formation of it, and that's what Titanic and Avatar and all the Force Awakens sort of took advantage of, especially Force Awakens. Force Awakens made nearly all the money it made in those first 3 weeks.
Yeah, it did.
But yeah, it's sort of a configuration type of thing if you have enough days before people get back into school and everything. But yeah, that can be a very valuable Christmas holiday season, can be very valuable. If you come out with...
wasn't the Hunger Games trying for that window and they just went too early in November?
No, I mean, Hunger Games had several problems. The first was that they didn't build their audience after they came out with their first movie. It was basically Hunger Games fans and people who liked the first one, I guess. And once you watch that second one, then you're like, well, I'm committed. Yeah, I'm going to watch the other ones. That's the thing that struck me was when we did Mockingjay and everything. I was like, who would watch this movie if it wasn't for the first Hunger Games? Nobody would watch this movie. That's how bad it is. It's not very good at all. So yeah, I think they made a lot of mistakes on the franchise itself. But yeah, they tried to come out with it before Thanksgiving. That's a good way to try to get, if you have a big movie, you get the Thanksgiving bump, and then if you're good enough, you get all the way to Christmas and the Christmas bump too. Right. And there's been a lot of like huge movies that came out before Thanksgiving and everything. Like you're talking about a lot of those Pixar movies. They play all the way to the end of January.
Harry Potter's used to come out in November too.
Yeah. Which is a perfect season to see something like that for whatever reason.
I agree.
Because it's the whole school season. Yeah. They don't really focus on the summer, and that's a great time to watch a bunch of wizards running around like in cold weather and things like that. That's what they show, right? That's the whole movie.
Yeah, that's what it is. Wizards running around in the snow and catching it with their tongues.
It's like boys running around the jungle.
Yeah. Boys running around in the jungle. Well, you know what? Peace Dragon's going to be a huge hit now that Tarzan is. But I was looking back at some of the 90s stuff, though, that came out in the summer. Stuff like The Firm and Forrest Gump and stuff like that. Like I don't think you would see those type of movies today coming out in the summer. Yeah. Like I think the last like adult type movie that, there's probably been a lot more, but the last big one that I remember was Gone Girl. And I don't know, Gone Girl was October, so that wasn't even a summer movie. I mean, they tend to avoid making those type of like book adaptation.
Well, how did The Nice Guys do?
Didn't do anything.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
that's a shame.
It's a good movie, but yeah, I mean, it was up against it. I mean, you come out with a movie like that in May, and everybody's excited about Civil War and all this other stuff. You know, it just didn't have much of a chance, I don't think.
Well, they can still take a swing. I mean, if you think about, so Pirates of the Caribbean came out, the first one came out in 2003, right?
Yep.
And that was a big swing, right? Because every other pirate movie before then pretty much had just failed.
Yeah.
Right? Cutthroat Island and Pirates.
Yeah.
And all that stuff. And there was just this, pardon the pun, like a perfect storm of the performance, depths, like take on the character, and just the great actors and fun dialogue, and an interesting universe that had yet to be explored, overexplored, which it is in the next 3 or 4 movies. And so, I mean, it's worth doing that, and I guess people are still seeing it. Having said that, of course, it was 2003 the last time they did something like that, and it paid off so well.
Well, and I think it's interesting to point out that when that movie was announced, we probably all rolled our eyes the way we did at the Tetris movie.
Absolutely, yeah. Well,
because it was based on a animatronic Disney ride, and we're like, what the hell? How are you going to make a movie out of that?
Yeah.
Well, and they just basically ignored the ride and made a pirate movie.
Yeah.
But, I still think the first Pirates movie is good. I really enjoy that one.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so, maybe I'm talking to myself here, and I should be a little more forgiving when I see a kooky adaptation idea come out, like Emoji the movie. Actually, no, that one's going to be terrible, I'm sure. But there was a time where we thought Pirates of the Caribbean, a movie, what the hell?
There was the same thing for the Lego movie initially, right?
Well, and again, to counter myself, they also made adaptations of The Haunted House and the bears that singing. You remember the
Country Bears?
Country Bears? No. And those were flops. So
yeah. And Pirates like that. I mean, look, it goes to show what happens when you stretch that premise further than that.
Yes.
Because after that, those movies are horrible.
Yes.
The first Pirates, I agree. I enjoyed that. It's a perfect summer movie.
Yeah.
Then they got too big for their britches, basically. That second one, I feel like there were a lot of people who loved that second one, and then they hated the third one. And I was like, they're the same horrible movie.
I think the people that liked Dead Man's Chest are the same people that liked The Dark Knight Rises. Like their expectations were so high. It's a weird like inverted U-shaped curve, basically, or bell curve, where like if your expectations are right in the middle, then you can be disappointed. If your expectations are too high, you're going to talk yourself into it, or you're just basically going to be completely disenfranchised.
I couldn't even have told you that Dead Man's Chest was the second one.
Yeah.
Like the subtitles all completely run together.
Yeah. No, totally.
Like the movies.
The chest is on Stranger Tides and at The World's End and all that stuff.
And whatever the next one is they're making.
Yeah.
That third Pirates of the Caribbean came out in 2007, the year that it was the year of the threequels is what they are.
Yeah.
And they're all horrible. Spider-Man 3, Shrek the Third, Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End. And I remember the way they configured that summer, everybody was like, this is going to be the biggest summer ever. And no, it wasn't. It wasn't the biggest summer ever because Spider-Man 3 started off and everybody was like, yeah, this is going to kick some ass.
Oh.
It put a bad taste in everybody's mouth, but then all these other ones that came out weren't good either. And so it sort of set the tone for that year. It was a year full of sequels. What else do we want to talk about as far as summer blockbusters?
The only other thing I had on my mind was how nostalgic I am for the days of standing in line for a summer blockbuster.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I remember Twister, there was the theater had set up some mock fire hydrant fountain thing that was spraying water. They had an overturned car and an uprooted tree, all as a display to promote the movie. And we were standing for an hour outside, wrapped around the block of this theater. And I don't think anybody has to do that anymore, anywhere.
No, they don't. That is something else that, curiously to me, by the way, has become a thing where the theaters don't want to sell out of a movie. They fear that if you go to a theater and find that it's sold out, you won't go there ever again, or you won't buy a ticket there ever. You'll go to the competition. But I remember when some big movies would come out, and our district manager would be like, be sure to interlock that big movie because we don't want to have anybody get turned away and all that. And I'm like, don't your profits for the movie in the first weekend, isn't that like at its lowest possible time? Yeah. That's at its lowest. Like, yeah, you'll sell more concessions and everything, and maybe that's what you're going to be happy about at the end of the day. But as far as actual movie tickets are concerned, you are behind the 8 ball on that, and you're basically making people buy tickets that they would have gladly purchased the following week.
Right.
When it starts to get more favorable for you. I never understood that. I'm sure there's somebody who knows why that's the big deal. But that's another thing that happens. There's so many prints of movies, because I remember Shrek 2, Hollywood 27 had 8 prints of that.
God.
It started every 15 minutes. And you would start it, and I was like, I don't think this movie's doing anything. And it ended up being a top 10 of all time movie that came out. But like, you'd start it, and it was like, 20 people in this theater, another 30 in that one. I always thought that sellouts created buzz for the movie. They said, oh yeah, I mean, I went there and it was sold out. Must be pretty good.
Well, and now all they care about is that first weekend gross, right?
Yeah.
And we'll never see Titanic again, a movie that was earning 20 to 40 million every weekend for like 3 months.
Right.
Because there was so much word of mouth and repeat viewing. I went to see it opening weekend. It was sold out. I had to see the following show. It builds anticipation. It builds buzz. And that's all gone now.
Yeah.
And that's why the studios don't care anymore how much legs their movie has. They just want that first 2 weeks to make enough money.
Blow it out.
Yeah. So it's just I'm nostalgic for those times, and they'll never come back.
Yeah.
Like the Seinfeld episodes you watch, and they're standing in line for a movie, and maybe in New York City you still stand in line at the actual ticket counter a little bit, but they used to have great conversations, talking about the movie we're about to see, and that's all gone now, because I know no show's ever going to sell out anywhere. And I don't even know how Fandango makes money anymore, because who pre-buys movie tickets? Like, why would you do that at this point? Like, I know when we go see Ghostbusters at Hollywood 27 in a few days, it's not going to be sold out. We're not going to get turned away. There's no doubt in my mind. So I'm not going to buy that ticket until I'm standing right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can go 15 minutes before the movie starts and just go. By the way, you ask who's buying on Fandango. I'm one of them, only because I don't like any lines. So like, there are lines you have to sit in.
Sure.
And so like, if it's even 10 people deep, I can't stand it. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to buy this ticket and just go right on in. Now that you're right. You don't have to buy it to get the ticket. You don't. Right. So that's the only reason I buy it.
Well, and at my local theater, which is a 14 or 16 plex, I don't think I've ever seen more than 3 people in line at concession or box office. There's just no, I don't know. I miss it, and I don't know why, because I hate lines too, but there was something fun about that summer blockbuster anticipation. Mm-hmm. We're an hour away from seeing this thing.
Yeah.
And it's gone.
We also haven't really touched on the fact that a lot of movies now are made not for American audiences.
Right.
It used to be that you had to have a domestic take of a certain amount in order to be a successful movie. Now, especially since they've opened it up, China's opened it up and everything, where China can actually outgross U.S. domestic a lot of times.
Like Warcraft.
Yeah, Warcraft is going to be the biggest beneficiary of foreign gross that we've ever seen, because here has done nothing.
Right.
But overseas, I think it's made its money back.
Yeah, I think it's done enough to make the studio at least think about making another one.
Yeah,
and that was all the Chinese audience, not America. Basically, gave that movie the finger.
And I have no idea what they did that was so different when they marketed it to China, and that everybody in China wanted to see this movie. Who knows? I mean, it's almost suspicious.
It is.
I mean, come on. Nobody wants to see this movie, and yet there's this one country that wants to see it.
The one that really opened my eyes on this was the World War Z.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't do terrible in the U.S. I think it made $100 million or something, but it did so much better overseas that movie was super profitable. They're making another one.
Yeah.
And, just from what I usually read about box office and reviews and success, I would have thought that movie was considered a failure. Nope. super success. Because of overseas audiences.
And it goes, and we were talking about Pirates of the Caribbean earlier. The fourth one that came out on Stranger Tides.
Yeah.
That one didn't do anything here. It may have hit 100, like whatever, but it was nearly 1 billion worldwide.
Jeez.
Because Johnny Depp is such a big name, and and just with the franchise itself, it just, I mean, now you're getting that type of stuff. You're getting that type of stuff like in The Martian, where they just out of the blue in the movie, it's almost takes you out of the movie, where they're like, well, we have a rocket that could help America, and like, well, that's top secret, isn't it? Yeah, but and they're like, well, and they make them even more heroic, that like, well, if no one will ever know that we could have helped, but we're going to help anyway, that type of thing.
Now someone's going to come on, because I'm the one that made that point originally, I think, when we talked about it, but in the book that actually happens. And I know the book doesn't matter when we're talking about movies.
Right.
But I'm sure the studio thought, this is fucking sweet that we get to write this into this movie.
I can't help but think that was written in because
it could be
the possibility of
From
it being
what I
a
understand,
movie.
the guy self-published the book, and then a publisher came in and scooped it up and republished it. And so it's entirely possible somebody nudged him and said, hey, put a Chinese rocket in there.
If he did, then I haven't gotten to that part in the book yet, but in the movie, let's if we can agree that it is in the book and they just went ahead and adapted the book, in the movie itself, it's so out of place.
Oh yeah,
it just comes out of nowhere.
Yeah, it does.
It's just like well, we're just at a point now where we don't know what to do.
Well, it's a huge Deus Ex Machina, because they just blew up the only rocket they had to send him any supplies.
After
He's
cheering
a dead
wildly.
Man. Yeah, he's a dead man.
Stop
and then all of a
cheering.
sudden, China calls, and we see Jeff Daniels be like, yes. I'm like, what the fuck? You should be jumping off a building. You shouldn't even been able to take that call. You had no hope.
But yeah, I mean, we talked about this before too with Transformers and everything. How Mark Wahlberg is using a credit card from a Chinese bank in that movie.
Yeah.
He's in Texas and all this other type of stuff. That there's a lot of stuff like now they don't care whether or not it does well here. I mean, if they're going to spend $150 million on a movie, they hope to make 300 something million overseas, and if that happens, then yeah, you're going to keep on seeing all these.
Now they have
freaking
been
movies.
thinking about this for a long time, because if you watch Demolition Man, one of my favorite terrible movies ever,
right,
where the Taco Bell is the only restaurant left after the restaurant wars, in foreign countries it's Pizza Hut.
Oh yeah,
and what's funny is when it comes on Showtime or Stars, the captions will say Pizza Hut, even though I get the American version that says Taco Bell. And it's very hilarious to me. But even back then, in what was that, 1990, 91? 93. They were thinking about foreign audiences won't connect to Taco Bell, but they will to pizza. There's a fucking Pizza Hut across the street from the pyramids in Egypt, right? But apparently not a Taco Bell.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I want to sort of talk also about some of these things, some of the hallmarks of summer blockbusters. I always feel like, first off, summer blockbusters are no different from any other holiday movie, right? Like almost every summer blockbuster seems like it's either set in the summer or it's super bright outside. But there's a sort of a hallmark or cliche of a lot of summer blockbusters is when, and you're watching a summer blockbuster movie when ... there are normal everyday people driving down the interstate, and the big monster or the big robot as an Iron Man or anything like that, they interact with them somehow. So they're just driving along. Oh, we're having our family vacation here. And then like Iron Man or whatever shows up in the middle of the street and picks up their car and whatever. There's a bunch of those. And it's always like very summer blockbustery to me when I see that. It happens in Lost World as well, where like, it's like, oh, let's have the dinosaur run around San Diego for a little bit. And I have, the citizens of San Diego and everything being chased by this dinosaur and everything. And then I think it happens, there's several movies like where it just happens where you're on the Golden Gate Bridge.
X-Men The Last Stand.
Yeah. The Golden Gate Bridge is always involved in these things. But it's interesting to me how movies are not only made just to be made, and like, you know, we'll see. They're made to be summer blockbusters. They're made to be in that, you know, June or July area. A lot of times they put stuff in there that just seems to fit with the months that they're coming out with.
Well, and the landmarks. I mean, it's just even the latest Independence Day. Jeff Goldblum cracks a joke about how much the aliens like to blow up landmarks. And being self-referential about it does not make it better.
No,
and I wish that we would get a summer blockbuster that didn't care if the building falling down around these people was iconic or not.
Yeah.
And just random. Gave me a visceral experience from their point of view. We got to get off the landmarks and monuments, man. It's really, there's a reason we go after it every time we see it when we're seeing a movie, because it's way beyond the point of, it pulls me out of the movie now.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. And even in Godzilla, the 1998 Godzilla movie, they're like nowhere near the Brooklyn Bridge, and they're like, well, we got to take the Brooklyn Bridge because it's iconic, right? You know, like they could be like completely on the west side of Manhattan, like they could be in Harlem, and they'd be like, let's go to the Brooklyn Bridge.
We definitely need to get by that huge building. So we could do a couple of questions.
Okay.
Yes.
Good.
Question. I got something to say. I want the truth.
I am listening.
Okay, so we got a lot of good questions from Twitter when Jeremy tweeted out. Here's the first one that comes from Twitter. What are movie quotes that you use in day-to-day life? And I think we all talk in movie quotes a lot. So what are you guys' picks?
Well, I told the one last time about how often I say, welcome home, you deserve medals when my wife comes home from work. But I also do that Satan, Saddam, I love you.
Yeah.
Which, of course, my wife's never seen that movie. Those come out of my mouth probably daily.
Yeah.
But I'll think of some more while you guys go.
Well, mine is usually anytime we're not complete with something, or we're on a road trip or something like that, and we're not quite there yet, but we've like crossed into the next state or that kind of thing. You know, my wife or my family will be like, oh, yay, we're in Tennessee or we're in Kentucky or something like that. And I'll always use the quote from Pulp Fiction, like, let's not start sucking each other's dicks just yet. And my wife hates that. And,
Speaking of wives, in The Muppets Take Manhattan, when Kermit goes up to the top of the Empire State Building and yells his independence, and you're not going to get the best of me, New York, I'm staying. He goes, the frog is staying. And his voice cracks. And my wife and I do that one all the time. And it started a few years ago when we were going by the wine store or something, and I was driving, and I said, are you coming in? She's like, I'm staying. I said, are you sure? She said, the frog is staying. And so now, in place of I'm staying or I'm not going, we'll use that quote constantly.
Nice.
It probably goes to show how disgruntled of a movie theater worker I was, and how many others were. That we would quote Shawshank Redemption and Glengarry Glen Ross quotes a lot of times. Shawshank Redemption, my biggest one is "fuck this place, fuck it." It was just saying it out. You know, I worked at a theater where it seemed like the toilets would overflow like every 5 seconds. You'd get it fixed, and then somebody would go in there like, oh yeah, the toilet's overflowing in there, man. You were probably the one that caused it, didn't you? You know, like you go up and, you know, you just find a quiet space somewhere and just fuck this place, fuck it. And it was like a point where in Glengarry Glen Ross, me and a friend used to just quote that all the time, like when we were just like talking about stuff that we didn't like about the movie theater and everything. You know, it's like, it's a bunch of fucking nonsense. Treat people like that, you know, and all that. You know, we just keep on saying it's a bunch of fucking nonsense. This is a bunch of fucking nonsense. That's all we say. But those are the ones that I've used the most, probably.
My friend Josh used to quote, like, whenever we were getting ready to go for a meal, he would be like, will you go to lunch?
Yeah.
Will you go to lunch?
Yeah.
The other thing that when Chris and I were building out the studio, because we had just, on Jeremy's recommendation, we just watched Locke. We've been quoting Locke quotes the whole way through. It was just like, traffic is fine.
Yeah.
His accent's so awesome in that movie.
It's a stop and go.
It's a stop and go. I was talking to my wife the other day, and I was like, I was asking her to do something, and I said, I wouldn't ask you to do this unless you were solid, because you are. You are. I love that movie so much.
But it has so much to do with like just stuff that everyday work stuff. Like I wish I had that like when I was working at movie theaters. This is like a lot of the stuff that happens on lock. You know, I could quote that all day.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll do one more lightning round question. What is your favorite or best movie to put on in the background?
Well, right now, it's The Martian. And the last time I mentioned this on a podcast, somebody came on and said, Jesus Christ, Jeremy, The Martian. And I was just like, what? It's good. It's solid. I actually got out of the car yesterday after running a bunch of errands and said to myself, I hope The Martian's on.
And it usually is.
It usually is. Right now, that's my jam. And I think I've mentioned a bunch of other ones in the past. Dances with Wolves, The Untouchables, Field of Dreams, Hunt for Red October. Those are all movies that I can't pass up if I'm flipping channels. And they're all, I've seen them so many times. They're the perfect kind of movie to put on in the background while I'm editing or something. So every few minutes I can turn away and be entertained for a minute. And go, and as I know them backwards and forwards, I don't have to watch the whole thing. But right now, it's The Martian for sure. I'm kind of obsessed.
That's a good one.
I think that I have put on Dirty Rotten Scoundrels in the background more than any movie that I've ever done. It's so easy. It's like I've talked about this before when we're talking about the year, and it's an hour and a half. It's Steve Martin, Michael Caine, amazing. It's got a great story and all that, but it's also just one of those movies that you can ignore for 20 to 30 minutes if you're doing some work, and it's perfectly inoffensive in the background. But then if you ever look up, sometimes you got to sit there and watch the whole movie. But I don't think I have ever watched any other movies more than Dirty Rotten Scoundrels.
Nice. Yeah, mine is Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
Oh yeah,
that's a good choice.
Because you've got all the music in the background. You've got a pretty straightforward story, and you can pick that up anytime. And it used to be when I was in college, I would throw that on the DVD before I went to sleep, and that like kind of became my nightly routine for a while. So I've memorized everything with it, and it's a good movie to have in the background, definitely.
Awesome. Good questions.
Well, and you can keep on going to SoundCloud and stuff like that, and giving us comments there and everything. But that's going to be the SinCast for this week. This is Chris Atkins and Jeremy Scott and Barrett Scher. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening. Comment on our episodes on our SoundCloud page. Check us out on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and Reddit. And be sure to visit CinemaSins.com.
Temple of the Doom. Temple of the Dog. I'm going hungry.
It's for me, it's just perfect. I don't think I've popped that movie. Any more movies pop? Yeah, whatever. I haven't popped more than that in any movie. Whatever. Fuck.
You're popping a lot there.
I'm fucking out. Popping and locking.
Popping and locking.
Popping and locking.
That's the longest one ever.